Imagine being told to hurt someone, not out of anger or hate, but because a calm, polite man told you it was necessary. Now imagine most people obeyed, and the worst part? They weren't evil, they were normal. But here's the question that matters more than what they did. Why didn't they stop? Because once you understand the answer, you'll realize it still works today. In the early 1960s, the world was trying to answer an uncomfortable question. How could ordinary citizens participate in atrocities, not monsters or psychopaths? Neighbors, co-workers, parents. Psychologists believed the answer wasn't ideology or hatred. They suspected something far simpler. But to prove it, they would cross a line they didn't realize they were drawing. And once that line was crossed, no one knew how far it would go. The experiment began in the most harmless way possible. Volunteers were told they were helping with a learning study. They met a polite researcher in a lab coat. Everything felt professional, controlled, and safe. There was no violence, no threats or pressure, just a clipboard, machine, and a simple instruction. But here's the detail most people miss. Nothing bad happens at first, and that's the trap. Participants were asked to administer small electric shocks for wrong answers. The shocks were labeled 15 volts, 30 volts, 45 volts, mild, uncomfortable, and manageable. When participants hesitated, the authority figure didn't yell or threaten. He calmly said, "Please continue." And most people did, not because they wanted to, but because nothing terrible had happened yet. So if the first step feels harmless, how do you know when you've gone too far? As the shocks increased, something subtle happened. Participants stopped seeing themselves as the decision makers. They weren't choosing anymore. They were following instructions. Responsibility shifted, and once responsibility disappears, conscience weakens. But this raises a disturbing thought. If responsibility can be removed so easily, who's actually in control when harm happens? At higher levels, the person receiving shocks began to protest, then scream, then beg to stop. Participants showed clear distress. Some laughed nervously, some sweated, some pleaded with the researcher to end the experiment. And yet, when told, the experiment requires that you continue, most of them did. So now the question isn't why did they obey? It's why didn't the suffering stop them? Eventually, the screams stopped. Silence. Participants asked if the other person was okay. The researcher responded calmly. No response should be treated as an incorrect answer. In that moment, participants had a choice. Stop, or continue shocking a silent person who might be unconscious. And here's the statistic that shocked the world. 65% went all the way. So now we have to ask something even darker. If silence didn't stop them, what does? This was the Milgram Obedience Experiment, conducted at Yale, run by psychologist Stanley Milgram. It was never about electricity, it was about obedience, and it proved something horrifying. Morality is fragile when authority is present. When the results were published, the backlash was immediate. Participants reported lasting guilt. Some said they questioned who they were for years. Institutions rushed to respond. New rules were created around studies like this. But these safeguards didn't stop obedience. They only stopped the experiment. Because the mechanism Milgram uncovered didn't disappear. It moved into workplaces, institutions, and governments. Anywhere authority feels legitimate, responsibility is shared, and consequences feel distant. Milgram later explained this with a simple idea. They go on autopilot and stop owning their actions. They become tools, and tools don't feel guilt. They feel compliance. That's what makes this dangerous. Not authority itself, but the moment authority convinces you this isn't really on you. Think about how often that happens. Following policy, going along with the group, clicking, "I agree," staying silent because that's just how things are. No shocks, no screams, just small choices that feel harmless, until they aren't. The experiment ended decades ago, but the behavior didn't. It just became quieter, more polite, more acceptable. And the most dangerous part, most people still believe they would have stopped. Milgram proved that belief wrong. So the real question isn't whether this could happen again. It's who you would obey before you told yourself it wasn't your responsibility anymore.